My name is Genney, and I am so honored to be able to share with you guys this morning. Oh, you guys, that's a California thing. Somebody told me that you don't say you guys out here. I know you guys are all ladies and gals, but I'm probably going to say that a couple times during my talk. But I was reminded to mention the hashtag that we're using and really encourage all of you to use it. It's BTMoms14. So Twitter, Facebook, and we've got a lot of conversation going on around that, so just a reminder to use that hashtag. But I'm just going to start right in this morning with a couple of questions, and you can just answer by raising your hand. How many of you think that parenting is easy? It's a piece of cake. It's a walk in the park. Okay, how about this one? How many of you have parenting all figured out? If you do, I want to talk to you. Okay, we're going to start over, and let's just be totally real this morning. How many of you think that some days being a mom is really hard? Yeah. And how many of you have ever doubted or questioned yourself as a mom? I know I have, right? Look around, we all have. And how many of you agree that being a mom comes with a whole lot of mess and stress? Yeah, mess and stress. So I have two teenagers right now. My daughter Katie is 15 and my son Luke is 13. But when they were younger, they would go to my mom and dad's, grandma and grandpa's house every summer, and they'd go for about a week. And when they were younger, they were there 1 week. And the day before they came home, my daughter Katie called me in her cute little voice. She knows how to do this. Mommy, can we bring some frogs home? So my parents live on 40 acres in Northern California, beautiful farm property, and they have this big pond, home to plenty of pollywogs and frogs. So she asked me if she could bring some frogs home, and at the time we had mice, we had fish, and I mean, how many of you agreed that, okay, you can get a goldfish, but you have to be the one to clean the bowl, and then you end up cleaning the bowl. And so the last thing I wanted was more pets, but somehow she suckered me into it, and I said, okay, you can bring a couple. So how many agree that a couple means two? They brought 6. So they pull up into the driveway. My parents drove them home, and they pull up, and they're all excited, and they get out with one of those big white paint buckets. Mommy, look, and they pull open the lid, and there's just mud and reeds and rocks and 6 hopping frogs in there. And they were so excited, and the frogs were like really little, and I thought, well, okay, 2, 6, what's the difference, right? They were actually kind of cute. I don't know if anybody else thinks frogs are kind of cute, but they were the little ones. Besides, it wasn't the frogs that were the problem, it was the crickets. So a couple of days after we brought the frogs home, my husband Mike, he wakes me up, it's still dark, and he's shaking me, and he's like, Jen, I'm so sorry to wake you up, but I have a meeting I can't be late for, and there are crickets all over the house. And I was like groggy, and I'm thinking, crickets? See, we bought this thing for the frogs called the bug box. And it's this little box. If we have a slide, I have a picture of it. Okay, so it's this little box, and it's a whole little cricket ecosystem all in one box. So you have all these crickets in there, and on the label it says, tasty, plump morsels that stay fresh too. And so it has this little trap door on the side of the box. And so all you do, it's so cool, you punch open the trap door, and you shake a couple crickets into the frog cage, and then you close the little trap door, and you just set it on your kitchen counter, and there you go. At least that's what I did. I didn't read on the side of the box that it said place in vivarium. And even if I had read that, I didn't know that a vivarium was a frog cage. So I just shook a couple crickets out, put it on our kitchen counter overnight, but I taped over it for good measure, because I thought, I don't want those little buggers pushing the trap door open. I wanted to keep them in there. Well, apparently crickets eat tape. So I don't know how many crickets come inside those bug boxes, but let me just tell you, there was a great turnout at that cricket party at my house, 6 a.m. in the morning. There I was, no kidding, without coffee, I might add, and I'm a coffee nut, on my hands and knees, running around with paper towels, pinching up crickets and tossing them into the frog cage. It gave me the willies, and seriously, about even up to 2 weeks after that, we found crickets. You'd be in a room and there's a cricket scurrying across the baseboard. Definitely mess and stress. And I know that that's a really lighthearted example, you guys. And I also know that some of you in here right now are dealing with some tough things, some serious things that are making parenting hard and making it hard for you to find joy right where you're at. And so that's why I'm so excited to talk to you this morning about 5 ways that we as women and moms can find more joy right where we're at. I think, and what I call it mommy bliss, right? I think sometimes we feel like as moms, we have to have it all figured out, right? we feel like, okay, when we have perfect kids and we're the perfect mom, then we're going to feel happier. We just have to get it together. We've got to figure it out. Or if you're here and you're a mentor, you're a ministry leader, these 5 things can apply to you as well. Sometimes we feel like we have to have it all figured out before we can be qualified to mentor others and to lead others. And so this morning we're just going to talk about 5 things that can bring you more joy, more mommy bliss. And I want to start off by looking at the definition of the word bliss. Why do I say bliss? Perfect happiness, serene joy, paradise, and heaven. Okay, let's be real again. How many of you have had a week like that? Serene joy, perfect happiness, paradise, heaven, right? Everybody listened. Nobody sassed. Nobody argued. Nobody fought. Everybody cleared their dishes, did their chores, listened the first time. Anybody? It doesn't always happen. It's not always easy to find that joy right in the craziness in the middle of all that comes with being a mom. I mean, we're just trying to get everyone to eat their dinner, everyone to get to bed on time, everyone to clean their room for once in their lives. We're running around work, back, meetings, home, to school. We're running around from the doctor's office, the dentist. Like Steph said last night, we find it so hard to stay still. And as moms, it is hard to stay still sometimes. We forget to stop and think about, what's so magical about motherhood anyway? And if you're here and you're a mentor and you're a ministry leader, sometimes we get so caught up in trying to be everything to everybody else that we forget what God has made us to be in the process, and we lose our sense of joy. We lose our sense of happiness. And I want to share with you this morning just a few interesting facts on happiness. Has anybody heard of Marcus Buckingham? Okay, well, you should hear of him. He's great. I went to a Women of Faith conference, and he was one of the speakers, actually. And after I heard him speak, I was so inspired, I went and bought his book. It's called Live Your Strongest Life, and it's geared toward women, and it actually has some super interesting facts about women's happiness. So I just wanted to share a few of those with you this morning. One of them is, he says, you would think that because women have a better education, better jobs, and better pay than we used to, we would be happier and more fulfilled than we were 40 years ago. Actually, the opposite is true. Surveys of more than 1.3 million men and women reveal that women today are less happy relative to where they were 40 years ago and relative to men. And according to a 40-year study of 46,000 men and women, women begin their lives more satisfied than men, and then gradually become less satisfied with every aspect of their lives: marriages, finances, things they own, even their family. Women consume twice as much antidepressant medication and anti-anxiety medication as men, and one common myth is that having children makes women happier. In fact, Marcus has found that studies linking stress and satisfaction with motherhood reveal the same finding. Married mothers are always more stressed and less happy than married women with no kids. And so, the findings are obvious. Being a mom is hard. Being a mom is stressful. And if there's one thing that I want you to take from this talk this morning, is so much of the joy we have as women and as mom, and that overflows into our family, is about our perspective. It's about the way we see things, and it's about what we see. And I'm not standing up here saying I have it all figured out, because I don't. It is a daily choice. And so I'm just going to share 5 things that we can do as women to help us be more joyful right where we're at. And the first one is love for real, because we are all in this together, and we're better together. I had a conversation with a mom a while ago, and we were talking, and she was sharing with me that her toddler had just learned the word no, and she and her husband were really struggling with that, and that her toddler had hit this picky eating phase, and just meals were such a battle. And she was exasperated, and she threw her hands up, and she said, you know what? My husband and I talked about it last night, and we just decided we're failing as parents. And it broke my heart, because anybody who has a toddler or who has had a toddler, they say no. And you have kids that go through picky eating phase. And so I was telling her that, and I said, oh gosh, we went through that, and I was talking to her about it, and I just saw her shoulders just kind of in relief. And she says, you know what? I don't usually talk about these kinds of things. Maybe I should join a mom's group or something. And I got all excited. I said, you should. And I told her, gosh, even when my kids were really young, especially, being part of mom's groups was such a help to me. And she said, I don't know. Seems like any mom's groups I've ever heard of, they've just been judgmental and negative. And that broke my heart too. Because we were not meant to isolate as moms. We were not meant to put up walls, and we were not meant to judge each other. We all come from different walks of life. We all have different backgrounds. What works for one mom and one child might not work for another mom and another child, and we shouldn't judge each other. So many studies have been done on what makes people joyful, right? You could pick up books all over the place, you guys. What makes people happy and joyful. And one consistent finding over and over is the depth and strength of their relationships. So the people who have strong and deep relationships tend to be the happiest, most joy-filled people. So that should be really great news for us as moms, right? Because we love to get together. Look at us. We come together for conferences like this. We come together for MOPS and play groups and moms groups. And I don't know about you guys, if I go out to dinner with a bunch of friends at a restaurant, and if I have to go to the restroom, first thing I say is, anybody else have to go to the bathroom? We go to the bathroom together. We congregate together. But what good does all of that togetherness bring if we're judging each other? Or if we're acting like we're all fine, we have our masks on and we're fine, we don't want to be vulnerable, and we're really not fine. Our relationships won't be deep and strong. They're going to be shallow, and we won't experience that true joy that comes from the depth of those relationships. I have a friend, Laura Faudry. I'll probably be quoting her a couple of times. She is the director of the Soul Care Center in California, and she's also a marriage and family therapist. And she says this one little nugget that I think is just the best advice. She said, as moms, we should just all assume the best in each other. Assume the best in each other. Think about that for a second. What would happen if we just automatically, every mom we looked at, we assumed the best in that mom, and we didn't judge that mom? I used to mentor teen moms through Youth for Christ for many years, and I had one precious mom that I was mentoring. She was 16, and we were talking about the challenges that she was facing as a teen mom, and I said, what's the toughest thing for you right now? And she said, she didn't say like being up all night, nursing, changing diapers, learning how to be a mom. She didn't say any of that. She said, I feel judged when I go out with my baby. I feel judged on the bus, at the mall, walking down the street. And so I just encourage us, let's be real, let's love for real. Let's not judge each other. Let's accept each other. Let's help each other. Let's pray for each other. Let's take it one step further. I love the verse, 1 John 3:18. Dear children, let's not merely say that we love each other. Let's show the truth by our actions. I had a mom who, she doesn't know this to this day, but I share this story. She impacted me so much. When Katie and Luke were 7 and 9, they went through a super picky eating phase. Katie was a picky eater, but Luke was really a picky eater. He had a gag reflex. Does anybody here have kids who have a gag reflex? It's hard because you feel like you should be, you're going to sit at that table till you eat your vegetables, but then they eat their vegetables and they throw them up. So you feel like you should be forcing them to eat things, but you don't want to because it's the texture that gets them. So long story short, Luke had a really picky eating phase, and Katie was a picky eater too, and I was stressed as a mom. I found myself making things quesadillas, plain pasta, things that they could, were easy, and they, didn't have a lot of flavor and texture, and I was like, they're not getting enough nutrition. I can't keep doing this. I have to come up with a plan. And I can't remember if I read this somewhere, if I even came up with it myself, but what I decided to do was once a week, the kids would be the head cook for a meal in our house that week. And so we would go through cookbooks together. They would pick out the meal. We would go to the grocery store. They would help me shop for that meal. They would pick the night that we would make it on, and they would be the head cook that week for that meal. And you know what? It worked awesome. They ended up trying things they never would have tried had I just made it and put it in front of them. So it was really working, and it was really great. But here's the thing. After a while of doing it, it started to become a whole lot of work for me. I started to feel the effort of it. I was kind of getting drained. It was a lot of work. So one Sunday, Mike and I took the kids to Starbucks after church, and we had brought cookbooks, and we thought, okay, we're going to go to Starbucks, and then we're going to have the kids pick their meals that they're going to cook, and then we'll go to the grocery store after that. So we were sitting there, and the kids were reading through the cookbooks, looking at pictures and deciding and flipping the pages and deciding. And they finally picked their meal for that week. And I looked at the recipes, and I was like, those are good choices. That's going to be tasty. And inside, I was like, oh. To be honest with you, I was groaning because I was like, oh, I got to buy all those ingredients. And oh, man, that's going to take a long time. And I was just feeling the effort of it. And that is when the woman at the table next to us comes over to me, and she puts her hand on my back, and she says, "You're a really good mom." And I kind of smiled, and I said, "Thanks." And she said, "Is this something you do with the cookbooks all the time?" And I didn't know she had been listening to us, and so I explained to her, what we were doing and why we were doing it. And she looks at me and she goes, "I think that's great." She pats my back and she says, "You're a really good mom." And I'm not kidding you, I was almost like, started bawling right there in Starbucks, because I was at that place where I was just wondering if all the effort was worth it, right? I was tired. And I needed to be reminded that it was. And sometimes as moms, the most inconvenient choices for us, or the ones that are the most work, are the ones that are the best ones for our kids. And so I just want to pause and say, if you're here this morning and you're in that place where you are wondering if all the effort is worth it, I want to remind you that it is. You're a really good mom, and don't forget that. And so if we all assume the best in each other, and if we love for real, we take it in action. I just challenge all of us. Let's be intentional. We have a card ministry at the Mom Initiative where we write cards and we pray, "God, who do you want us to give this card to?" And you see a mom walking down the street and you give her that card. You guys can all join in on that. Love in action, love for real, love other moms. Reach out like that woman did to me at Starbucks and provide comfort. And the second thing that we can do to find more joy in our journey as a mom is to not rush the journey. And this is so in line with what Stephanie was talking about last night. I want to read this really quick poem to you guys. It was spring, but it was summer I wanted. The warm days and the great outdoors. It was summer, but it was fall I wanted. The colorful leaves and the cool, dry air. It was fall, but it was winter I wanted. The beautiful snow and the joy of the holiday season. It was winter, but it was spring I wanted. The warmth and the blossoming of nature. I was a child, but it was adulthood I wanted. The freedom and the respect. I was 20, but it was 30 I wanted. To be mature and sophisticated. I was middle-aged, but it was 20 I wanted. The youth and the free spirit. I think that's where I'm at. I was retired, but it was middle age I wanted. The presence of mind without limitations. My life was over, and I never got what I wanted. How many of us sit in the lap of joy in our homes with our kids and our families, and we miss it. We miss it. We're longing for something else. The bliss is right in front of us, and we miss it. I got a really important reminder of this a while ago, and it has just stuck in my mind. It was when Katie was about to go into middle school. And my husband, Mike, works at Hewlett-Packard, and he has traveled a lot over the years. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But he was gone on a business trip, and so we were at Katie's play practice late that night. So they were younger, so you don't keep them up that late. And I was thinking, I got to get them to bed. So we got home, and I had put Luke to bed, and I was tucking Katie in. I leaned over, and I gave her a kiss on the forehead and told her good night. And I turned to leave her room, and she says, "Mommy, will you stay in my room for a little while tonight?" And without even hesitating, I said, "No, not tonight. It's late. You've got to get to bed, and I have a lot to do." And so I walked back over to give her another kiss on the forehead, and she reaches her arms up around my neck, and she whispers in my ear, "Please." And I was like, oh. And I kind of sighed, and I thought, oh, gosh. I was going to fold a bunch of laundry that I had sitting in the laundry bin. You guys know how that is. The pile gets as tall as you. I was going to do that. I was going to catch up on emails. I had my plan. It was late. Please. And so I said, okay, but just for a minute. So I sat on her bed. She was tired, so was I. We didn't talk much. We just kind of sat there and listened to the bubbling of her fish tank and the hum of her ceiling fan. And she reaches out and holds my hand. And she yawned and she says, "Good night, Mommy." And I said, "Good night." And as I sat there, it hit me. I was like, I bet she's not going to ask me to stay in her room like this much longer. And I wished I hadn't told her no so quickly. And 1 minute turned into 2, and 2 minutes turned into 3, and I did not want to leave. And I was so thankful for that moment that I almost missed. But how many moments have I missed, you guys? I've missed so many moments. We're either thinking about what we have to do, or we're rushing the journey. And like Stephanie said last night, we need to be still. We need to let those little slivers of bliss creep into our day, Because when we slow down long enough, that's when it happens. That's when it can happen. At a time where there's so much joy to be found in the now, it's so ironic that so many of us moms, and I am so including myself in this, we think of the past or we think of the future. We're not really appreciating the here and now. I remember when Katie was a toddler and Luke was a baby, and Mike was traveling a lot. There was nights where, I was home alone, and I would just be overwhelmed. I would be overwhelmed. The diaper changes, the crying, the nursing, the lack of sleep. And I just remember thinking, I can't wait till they get a little older, because then it will be easier, right? And then, not too long ago, Mike and I were having this conversation, and we were talking, and we were toiling about whether or not to let Katie go to a certain friend's house. She's a teenager now, right? And we were toiling, and I caught myself saying, you know what, gosh, it was so much easier when they were younger. And isn't that how it is? Right? We miss the bliss right in front of us. So let's just challenge ourselves when we go home, when we go back to our busy lives, when the schedule starts to kick in and we start our rushing around, to not rush the journey, to leave room for that bliss to come into our days, for that joy to come into our days, because it will. The third thing we can do, how am I doing on time? The third thing we can do is ask for help when you need it. Okay, this sounds so easy, right? And almost cliche. Ask for help when you need it. It is something I have struggled with. Is there anyone else out there who has a hard time asking for help when you need it? Yeah, it's not always easy, because it means being vulnerable. And you don't want to impose on people. You don't want to bother people. So this is definitely something that I have struggled with. Mike, again, traveling a lot when the kids were younger. And there was a year where I was pretty much a single mom. He was on a bunch of international trips because of an assignment that he was on. And I remember one time, and I would get offers for help from friends. I had sweet friends say, hey, I'm at the grocery store. Do you need anything? No, I'm fine. Hey, do you want me to stop by? Do you have laundry? Do you want me to come sit with you? Oh, no, I'm fine. Do you want me to come spend the night with you? Are you lonely? No, I'm fine. And so at the end of this year period, Mike was in China for about 11 days. And all of a sudden, I started getting migraines and insomnia. I had never had either before. So I literally I remember crying, feeling like, am I ever gonna feel normal again? Anybody had insomnia before, where you lay awake at night and you watch the clock tick and tick and tick, and then you start thinking, how am I gonna take care of the kids tomorrow, because I haven't even fallen asleep for 5 minutes? So I was in that place, and it wasn't until Mike, Hewlett-Packard put a freeze on travel for a while, so he was home for a while after that, and it wasn't until he was home for a while, and the stress kind of alleviated a little bit, that I realized how stressed I had been. Sometimes we're in the lap of stress, and we don't even know it, and it's causing physical things, and we don't even realize it's stress, and I don't know why we do that sometimes. We need to look at all we have on our plates and ask for help if we need it. I love the verse, and I think Stephanie shared this last night. A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated. This is Ecclesiastes 4:2, and this is the New Living Translation, which I love. A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. I love that. 3 are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. I wonder how many of us in here this morning are in that lap of stress, or we just have so much going on, or we're struggling with something and we're not asking for help. Maybe we don't even realize we need help. I would just encourage you to think of that, because otherwise we're leaving ourselves vulnerable to being easily broken. I had to learn this lesson the hard way about 5 years ago. God did a number on me, let me tell you. So it was Mike's birthday, and we were getting, we were gonna have people over, and then we were gonna go out to dinner. And I was in our front courtyard, and I was watering plants, and I was in flip-flops that had no traction on the bottom, so they were super slippery. And we had stained concrete at that house, so it was slippery concrete, not a good combination. So I was watering the flowers, so I slipped, and I fell, and I landed on my elbow, and I broke my arm. I didn't know I broke my arm, because I never had a broken bone before. So we went to dinner that night, and I remember kind of like holding my arm, and people were all hugging me, and I was like, and I thought the next day, I said, I could barely sleep, and I said, I think something is more, I think I really hurt my arm. So I went to the doctor. Sure enough, it was broken, got a sling thing, And a couple days later, Mike left for another trip to India, a long stint to India. I think that was 11 or 12 days. And a couple of days into him being gone, I was rushing. This is another reason why we need to slow down. I was rushing to get Luke to soccer practice, and I had socks on, and so I had my cast on, and I ran out into the garage, and we have stained concrete in our garage. Moral of the story, do not stain your concrete. We had stained concrete in our garage in that house, and so I wanted to grab chairs so I could sit on them at soccer practice, and so I was maneuvering myself around the car, going fast. I slipped again, couldn't catch myself, and completely tore my knee, dislocated, and completely tore my retinacular. I was on the garage floor screaming. My son comes out. My son and daughter had to carry me to the couch. I could not move. Had to call my parents bawling, and they packed the car, rushed out the 2 hours, and they stayed with me. And guess what, you guys? Boy, did I have to ask for help. Mike was gone. He couldn't come home. I was in a wheelchair because I couldn't use crutches because my arm was broken. And so I couldn't, you should have seen my mom, bless her heart, I couldn't wash my hair myself. I couldn't shower by myself. I couldn't drive the kids anywhere. Life came to a stop. And I have a picture. I don't know if I think I have a picture. If you have that slide, yeah. So this is me in the wheelchair when Mike got home, and then that's my cat Chester. He liked the wheelchair, and that's me in my first scooter ride at Target. I had a hard time steering that thing. It was fun though. So honestly, it was very humbling, and boy, did it teach me a lesson. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to accept help. And guess what? People like to help. We like to help others, right? We see a mom struggling. We're fine offering help. We want to. We should be able to accept that help from others too. And you do not have to be in a crisis. You do not have to be sick. You do not have to be injured like I was. And so I would just encourage you to think about, where are you at as a mom right now? What do you have on your plate? How do you feel physically? Are you stressed? Do you have anxiety? Are you depressed? Are there physical things that are going on? Could it possibly be because of stress? Do you need to ask for help with something? In my workshop later today, we're going to dive a lot deeper into that and go through a worksheet and kind of figure out where we really are as moms. But I really just encourage you to be okay asking for help. The next thing you can do to have more joy is cry for you. How many of you guys are criers? You cry, commercials, Hallmark cards, movies. I am such a crier. I was up here bawling in worship. I just cry. I cry a lot. My poor husband. He's used to it by now. But how many of you guys are not criers? It takes a lot for you to cry. You're just not that emotional. You know what? I think we need each other. We need each other. We balance each other out. And whether you're a crier or not, I can hear some of you sitting here this morning, like a whole section of her talk dedicated to crying. Like who wants to wallow in their tears like that, right? But I'm not talking about tears necessarily. When I talk about crying for you, I'm talking about strength and healing and acknowledging your feelings. We moms are just experts at dealing. Right? We're experts at dealing. Stress comes and we're pros at delaying stress relief. We're so good at keeping everybody else happy, sometimes at the expense of our own feelings. But sometimes we need to let those feelings out. And certainly crying helps, but also being able to share what we're going through and to not stuff those feelings down. Being a mom can remind you of when you were a child, right? Your kids hit certain ages, and you start to remember certain things in your life from those ages. And so parenting can often be a trigger for things that you have successfully stuffed down in your life for many, many years. I know that was at least true for me. And I just want to acknowledge, I know some of you are sitting here this morning and you might be listening to me talking about, things we can do to be more joyful, and you're thinking, that's all fine and good, but that's not for me. You don't know what I've been through, Genney. You don't know what life has dealt me. You don't know the choices I've made. You don't know what I'm going through right now. And maybe you've counted yourself out of the joy game. Maybe this bliss thing, you think it's just not for you. And I just want to encourage you, as we talk a little bit more about this, to open your heart. This is for you. You were made for joy. You were made for a purpose. Don't count yourself out of this game. We all have a story. And if I had to guess, I think every single woman in this room has one thing, at least one thing, that we need healing from. It might be little, it might be overwhelming, but don't count yourself out of the joy. When I was a kid, I think we can put the next slide up. I think I was 7. I was in first grade. So that's me and my siblings. I also have an adopted brother who's not in there because we hadn't adopted him yet. But I'm the second one down the line, so I'm the second oldest. And my family went to Wyoming for vacation on a dude ranch. Anybody ever been to a dude ranch before? Yeah, so it was just so beautiful. We stayed in this cabin thing, and I remember the hills of Wyoming even at that young age, I remember being struck by the color of the leaves. And so that was us at the Amtrak station. We took the train to Wyoming, and then when we were there, one day we went on a family horse ride. So my whole family, we all got on our own horses, and we had a guide, and we went up in the mountains, and I think the next slide has a picture of us. Okay, so I'm on the far left, and I could barely get my legs into the stirrups. I mean, this is a big black horse, and I was this little first grader. And so we were on these horses, and so we went up, and I think it was a couple of hours ride up in the mountains of Wyoming. It was just beautiful. And we were coming back, and so we're on the home stretch, and we had this big pasture to go through, and then you kind of turn and you went into the horse corral for the horses to come home. Now, does anybody have horses, know about horses? Okay, so you might know that sometimes when horses get close to their home, they take off. Yeah. So here I was, this little girl on this big horse, and all of a sudden, my horse took off. And I remember my feet flew out of the stirrups. I was bouncing on the saddle, grabbing to the mane, grabbing onto the brim of the saddle, and just screaming, right? And my horse just galloped off down that pasture, turned to go into his corral, and there was this narrow opening that he could go in, and on either side was a big, tall fence. And I remember as a little girl thinking, he's going to jump the fence, he's going to jump the fence, he's going to jump the fence. I'm flailing, he's going to jump the fence. Well, he didn't jump the fence. He ended up going through, and he stopped. Here comes the guide. Here comes my family. Are you okay? Are you okay? The first thing I said, and I don't even know why I said this. It's the first lie I remember telling. I said, my horse jumped the fence. And they're like, oh, your horse jumped the fence. You stayed on. And it became this tall tale, right? And everyone was so amazed that I stayed on my horse and it jumped that fence. And honestly, the minute I said it, I was like, I kind of felt guilty, right? And then we go back to the dude ranch, and we're having dinner, and my parents are talking about it, and I was like, oh. And I kind of thought I should tell the truth, but I was scared, and I didn't. So we get home. So my mom has a lot of sisters, and so I remember her calling her sisters, and Aunt Marianne, Jenny's horse jumped the fence, Aunt Connie, Jenny's horse jumped the fence, Aunt Julie, Aunt Sheila, and I remember just hearing the story come up from time to time over the years, and my toes curling in shame, right? It didn't happen, right? And you know those stories that you kind of you all get together for holidays, and it's kind of the stories you talk about? Well, this seemed to be one of them, right? And I always dreaded when it would come up. And there I am in high school, and this horse story would come up, and I'd think, I have to, this didn't, should I confess, And then I go to college, and it's even worse, and I'm just like, okay, I'm an adult now. I've got to fess up to this thing, right? But you know what, you guys? I was embarrassed, and it's a little silly lie. I had shame. It was such a big thing. The secret had grown so big that I just couldn't bring myself to confess. I couldn't bring myself to say, you guys, you know what? Actually, that really didn't happen, Okay, it gets worse. So then I have kids, right? And my kids are at my mom and dad's house. And I hear them in the other room. My mom says, did we ever tell you the story when your mom's horse jumped the fence? And I'm like, no! And I'm thinking, I gotta run in there and tell them it's a lie. And then I was like, oh no, but I'm trying to teach them not to lie. So how would that look? So I can't confess it now. I have to wait till they're older, right? And it just became this thing, honestly. I had tucked it away for so long, I couldn't share it, right? And so finally, here's how I ended up finally sharing it, you guys. I went through a Bible study. This was just 3 years ago. 40 years old. 40 years old. And for you Bible study writers and teachers, Bible studies change lives. Change lives. Oh my goodness, this was one of those. So my friend was actually leading the study, and the topic was unconfessed sin. And by this time in my life, I had gone through healing, and there were so many things hiding under my rocks that I had already dug out, and I dealt with, and I had experienced freedom and healing from. And I knew the power in shedding light on secrets. I knew it. And so, but there's still this stupid little horse story, you know? And so she was talking, and she said, think about it. Is there anything in your life? What's hiding under your tent? Because it'll steal your joy at one point or another. It'll make you feel bad about yourself at one point or another. What's hiding under your tent? And I'm like, okay, I've gone through all this revealing and telling, and now it's this horse story thing. So I said, okay, you know what? I said, God, you know what? I'm going to confess this. I'm going to do it. 40 years old, I can do it. And so I went home and did the brave thing. I wrote an email to, I'm serious, to my whole family. And I had this whole, you remember the story in Wyoming of the horse? It really didn't happen, and I'm so sorry, all these years I've been wanting to tell you, blah, 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 this big, long dissertation, right? And so I didn't send it. I chickened out. And so I said, well, you know what? Okay, I've got it ready, and I will do that sometime, but I don't think now's the right time, and it's really not that big of a deal. It's just stupid. It's not a big deal. Go to the study the next day. What's the topic? Delayed confession. I am not kidding you. Sometimes you have an intention to confess and you move forward, but then you don't really do it. And I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, I'm doing it. So long story short, I talked to my mom, I talked to my family, and you know what, you guys? When you get a secret out, it dissolves. I'm telling you. And again, I know that's a silly example, but my mom, she says to me, oh, Genney, I feel so bad you kept that inside so many years, So it's a silly story, you guys, and like I said, believe me, I've had some other way more serious things that I've had to work through. And I just want to share a quote from my friend Laura, who I mentioned before. And this goes right along with crying for you. She says, give yourself permission to acknowledge and accept your feelings because they're real and legitimate. When you do that, you're able to accept your children's ranges of emotions as legitimate too, and you're able to accept them for who they are and not who you want them to be. When we acknowledge and work through our own feelings as moms, we become healthier and happier, and so do our kids. Our freedom directly impacts the freedom of our kids. And I know sometimes we think about, this crying for you, this actively pursuing healing from the things that we know are stealing our joy can be scary. It was scary for me. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. It was scary for me. It can sound like too much work. You don't have time. You don't want to bother. Life's short, move on, get over it. I've been there. But there's such joy on the other side. It's worth it. And crying for you doesn't mean you have to dwell there. I love the verse, the promise in Isaiah 43, 18, 19. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. We don't have to dwell there. God is always doing a new thing. And the cool thing is he has a way of prompting us when we need healing. You guys might be feeling that prompting right now. I remember, the quickening of the heart, the tug, the knowing that you have something that, maybe once and for all, you need to lay that down. Maybe once and for all. Because stuffing our feelings and not acknowledging them, it doesn't help us. They're not going to go away. I remember, for years, I minimized and tucked things away that I had done as a teenager or that had been done to me that I felt really bad about. And I had just tucked them away. And, they're really not a big deal. I just decided, move on. Like I said, life's short, no big deal. Stuff. But here's the thing. Unresolved issues always come out in some way. And as moms, they can come out in ways that can impact our kids. For me, they initially came out in the form of an eating disorder in college, where I really struggled with food and my self-image. I felt so bad about the things that I had done or that had been done to me. And I thought at that time that God was this kind of pie-in-the-sky guy who might strike me down at any minute with lightning because I was so bad, right? And most of my prayers were prayers of, please forgive me, please forgive me, please forgive me. And he's so good. He intervened in my life in so many ways, from, people, church, all those different things at that time, gave me exactly what I needed and taught me about his unconditional love. His unconditional love. And that healed me from that. I found such freedom in knowing I was loved no matter what. I was forgiven. And so, but healing is kind of like the layer of an onion. You go through different phases. Sometimes it takes time. All our journeys are different. And so when Katie and Luke were getting older, and Katie started approaching her teen years, I started feeling this other layer coming up for me. Kids hit ages. We start thinking about those ages. Things come up we might not have remembered or we haven't thought about in years. And I remember I started having a lot of fear as a mom. I was like, are they going to make some of the same choices I made? Are they going to be put in some of the same circumstances I was going to be put in? And I became fearful. It was nagging at me. And I remember one night, just literally being up most of the night, toiling, worrying, struggling with some memories. And I remember getting up that morning and putting my feet on the ground, and I remember saying, okay, God, I do not know what's going on, but you have to help me. I need help. That was my first prayer. Like this, I need help. And I had to pray for courage because I was scared. Like I kind of didn't want to go there. I really wasn't sure all that was going on. And I had this sense of knowing that, you know what, you got to deal with some stuff still, Genney. You got to deal with some stuff. And it was impacting my parenting. My kids didn't necessarily know it. I knew it. I was fearful of the teenage years. And so in my own healing, again, God just, you pray that prayer. And if you're at a place where you need help, maybe your starting point is just, God, I need help. Give me the courage to cry for me. Give me the courage to take this step, because he is faithful and he will answer. And he, brought, again, people and a Bible study that brought me such freedom and healing. And for me, the healing, so much of the healing was in the telling. Being in this study, this 13-week study with these other women, and being able to share for the first time some of the secrets I had kept inside for years was so freeing. There was freedom in the telling. And so I would just encourage you, if you have something that you've been holding inside, maybe this is your weekend for the first time to bring that secret into the light. Get it out of darkness. Let it lose its power, because it will. I'm not saying you're going to be instantly healed. God can instantly heal, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying all of our journeys to healing are different, but I do know, and I know it for a fact, when we bring our secrets out of the darkness and into the light, God brings such freedom from that. And I want to mention, too, we have a prayer room. I know that Stephanie and Tracy talked about it earlier, but we have a prayer warrior named Michelle. And let me tell you, she prayed for me yesterday. She is a prayer warrior with such a loving and compassionate heart. So I would encourage you, if you just want to pray, and even if it's you're at the point where you're not sure what to say or what you want to say or what you want to share, but you just want to pray for the courage to take this step, I would just encourage you to visit that prayer room and go pray with Michelle, or grab any one of us. Come talk to me. Come talk to any of the Mom Initiative moms, and we'd love to pray with you and pray for you. And the last thing I want to mention on this is that, sometimes we feel like we've stuffed our stuff down and we kind of hide it from God, right? He's the pie-in-the-sky guy, and if he really knew what we did, he wouldn't love us. But God knows us. He knows us. I love Psalm 139. He says, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me." He loves us unconditionally. He invites us to come to him. He says, Matthew 11:28, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Psalm 62:8, trust in him at all times. O people, pour out your heart before him. God is our refuge. Psalm 52:22, cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will sustain you. One of the recent episodes of So You Think You Can Dance, does anybody watch that? So I'm not like a regular watcher, but I used to dance when I was growing up, and so I caught an episode from this season, and there was a girl, this precious young girl, she was 18, her name was Danny Platts. And so she started off sharing her story on this show before they showed her audition, and she shared that she stopped dancing when she was 16 because she had been struggling with an eating disorder. And she had found victory with that eating disorder and was back dancing, and here she was auditioning on So You Think You Can Dance. And so she started off her dance, and she had one of her arms was behind her, broken, right? And throughout her dance, she had this beautiful, intricate thing where she was helping her arm, and then her arm would go like this. And, I was watching it mesmerized. I was actually crying. And one of the judges, Christina Applegate, what she said afterwards just really struck me. She said, I get exactly why you did that with your arm. You're broken, and it's okay to be broken. And you're helping others heal by sharing your story. And so I just want to say, you know what, ladies? It's okay to be broken. It's okay to be broken. We've all been there at one point or another. You might be completely free and healed. You might be at the point where you have to deal with something and you haven't even started, or you might be in the thick of it right now. But it is okay to be broken. And you can help to heal and heal others by sharing your story. There is no judgment here. And the last thing that we can do, and this ties into that, is love being a mom and don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. We keep saying that all weekend, better together, better together, better together. And it is so true. There is so much to love about being a mom, and I know sometimes it's hard to feel that, you guys, in the craziness and the chaos. I love the part in the Prince Caspian movie where Lucy sees Aslan in the forest, and she looks at him and she says, you've grown. And he says, with each year you grow, so shall I. And isn't that how it is as moms? Each year our kids grow. We grow as moms, as women, as grandmas, as aunties, as friends. There's so much to love about that. My daughter's pastor has an analogy about parenting that I love. And he said, parenting is raising a child is a lot like learning to ride a bike or teaching them to ride a bike. How many of you have taught a child to ride a bike? Yeah, so you know how when you're first teaching them, you grab onto the handlebars really tight, right? Or you run behind them and you're holding on for dear life on the back of their seat because you don't want them to fall, right? And you're reminding them how to steer and when to put on the brakes and how to keep their balance. And then suddenly they start to pedal, right? And you start to let go, slowly, tentatively. You might run beside them still or behind them still, and sure, you're going to have to pick them up when they fall and kiss a bruised elbow or two and help dust them off. But it's an awesome feeling to see them ride, right? And that's how it is with parenting, and that's how God is with us. He runs beside us and he smiles as our pedals quicken, and he helps us steer. And he dusts us off when we fall, and he comforts us when we get hurt. And we don't have to be alone. We have moms coming alongside us, and we have God right beside us, and he loves us. And true, deep joy comes from knowing that, and knowing that he loved us so much that he sent his son, Jesus, to die on the cross for us. That's how much he loved us. And we've got that comfort, and that's where true, deep, and lasting joy comes. And he not only loves us, he values us right where we're at, And our role as a mom is highly valued. You know, we often don't really see the rewards. It takes a long time sometimes, right, you guys? I mean, sometimes we don't see the fruits of our effort for so long. But the rewards of parenting are there. You know, I had a really great reminder of this, and I'm going to wrap with this story. A few baseball seasons ago, Luke hit a hitting slump, and all of a sudden he just couldn't hit the ball. And he was so discouraged and hard on himself. And we said, you know what, bud, hey, it happens to the pros. It's no big deal. You know, you'll get it again. Don't stress about it. Don't worry about it. And so one day he was out, Mike was practicing with him, and Mike was in the driveway throwing to him, and then Luke would be down on the street, and he'd pitch it, and he would hit it. And so they would do this, and a lot of times Luke would hit the ball straight over the house. Well, this day, he couldn't hit the ball, and I was upstairs in Katie's room, and I had the window open so I could hear them through the screen. And I heard Luke say, "Dad, what's wrong with me?" And I just was like, oh, it just broke my heart. And the next morning, Luke came in. It was an early morning game. He came in and sat on our bed. And I could tell, he didn't say anything. I could tell he was nervous. And I said, "Hey, bud, today is going to be your big day. You are going to have a great game. You know, just believe in yourself and pray." And he's, kind of nods. And I could tell he was still worried about it. And I said, "Hey, you know what? Just picture yourself hitting the ball over the house like you do when you practice with Dad. Just picture that. You know, you've hit it before. You're going to hit it again. Don't worry about it." You know, he's okay. Well, it turns out that game was his best game ever. He hit 3 doubles, and he got Player of the Game award, and he had a great game. And after the game, he and I were walking out to the parking lot, and he looks up at me, and he smiles, and he says, "I remembered what you told me, Mom." And I nonchalantly said, "Oh, to picture yourself hitting the ball over the house?" And he says, "No, to believe in myself. I didn't forget." And that's what we do with our kids. We don't realize it. It was so humbling. I got so choked up. It's like one conversation, we can impact our kids' hearts. You know, being a mom doesn't come with high pay, bonuses, stock options, corner office space. But the rewards are so much greater. And I just want to leave you guys with this one verse from Corinthians. I think I have a slide of it. "Therefore, my brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor is not in vain." Your labor, moms, is not in vain. And for mentors and ministry leaders, your labor is not in vain. Let's love each other for real. Let's slow down and enjoy the moments. Let's ask for help when we need it. Let's cry if we need to. And let's love being moms. There is so much bliss in being a mom, but sometimes we just need a little help finding it. Will you guys pray with me? Dear Lord Jesus, I just thank you so much for this time this morning. I thank you for these moms here, God. You know where each of us is right now, God. You know exactly where we are, what we're struggling with. You know our past. You know our choices. You know our decisions. You know what's been done to us, God. I ask specifically this morning that the chains would fall. If any of these moms in this room this morning are being bound by chains, Lord God, I ask in Jesus' name that those chains would fall, that this weekend would be the beginning of that, Lord God, that you would work mightily and powerfully in their lives, Lord. I pray, Jesus, that you would comfort each mom here, that you would remind her of her worth, that you would remind her of the blessings in being a mom, that you would give her unexpected joy, Lord, that you would slow her schedule down, that you would be present and fill her heart with joy. Bless her family. Bless her life, Lord God. I pray that you would equip us, God, to be the moms that you have called us to be. I thank you for the honor and privilege of being a mom. I pray your blessing over the rest of this conference, Lord God, in Jesus' name. Amen.